Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. So today we'll be continuing with the rapid revision series as this week is surgery. Our second topic in surgery is urology. Okay, starting with tumors. So the most important tumor is RCC, but before that, let us read some other tumors like oncocytoma. So, oncocytoma is tan or mahogany on gross appearance. It has a pseudocapsule. It is seen with middle-aged female, and the CD shows spoke wheel arrangement. Right. There is loss of chromosome 1. How do we manage it? If it is less than 4 centimeter, then partial nephrectomy is done, or for tumors more than 4 centimeter, radical nephrectomy is advocated. Now, oncocytoma is closely resembling chromophobe RCC. Right. It is while oncocytoma is benign, chromophobe RCC is malignant, and both on CT will show a central slate scar. So it is basically needed to differentiate between the two. So how do we do that? First, using the Hale colloid iron stain, which stains the chromophobe RCC, while oncocytoma is not stained. Claudin, parvalbumin, and CK7. All these are positive in chromophobe RCC. Right. Next, clear RCC. It is arising from the PCT, right? And chromophobe RCC, it arises from the intercalated cells. Then Hale colloidal iron stain is positive for chromophobe RCC, while clear cell will not stain with it. And the tumor marker CA9 is positive in clear cell RCC, while we read in chromophobe it was CK7. Okay. The most common renal tumor is RCC. Most common benign renal tumor is oncocytoma. Most common benign lesion of kidney, it is a simple renal cyst. So if you perform an ultrasound in patient, like majority of them, the elderly especially or post-dialysis patient, they have the presence of renal cyst, which is very common. Especially if it is a simple cyst, that is, it is filled with fluid and there are no septations or very thin septations, nothing needs to be done. They can be left as it is. Then on morphology, oncocytoma, chromophobe, RCC and clear cell RCC are yellow, and therefore we differentiate these three as we saw. Okay, so we read chromophobe RCC. It arises from the intercalated cells. It is associated with Burke-Hobdube syndrome, right? What else can be seen in BHD syndrome, which is on chromosome 17, is the presence of lung cysts. All right. Then on electron microscopy, then we can see plant cell, raisin nucleus, and clear cytoplasm. Right. And chromophobe RCC has a good prognosis. Now, the prognostic factors of RCC, first is Furham's grade, right? It is a nuclear grade. Then pathological grade, it is the most important prognostic factor. Stage, renal vein invasion or wall invasion, that is IVC wall invasion, right? So if they are invaded, then it indicates a poor prognosis. Tumor markers of RCC, CA9, which is specific for clear cell RCC, we just saw. Ki67 is more than 15%, right? And depending on it, it is of stage 1, 2, 3 and 4. 1 is 15 to 25, 2 25 to 35, 3 between 35 to 45, and 4 more than 45. Next is H1B7. Right. So we read oncocytoma first, then we read about clear cell and chromophobe RCC. Next is papillary RCC. So here there is low molecular weight cytokeratin, right? AMCAR, that is alpha mercapto coenzyme A racemase, and CK7. CK7 was also positive in chromophobe RCC. Right. What are the risk factors for RCCs? Established are tobacco, obesity, and hypertension. The non-established are radiation, diet that is rich in proteins, thorotrust. Right. Thorotrust is a dye that is also associated with other cancers apart from RCC like HCC, cholangiocarcinoma, and angiosarcoma. Okay, and angiosarcoma is the most common cancer that is associated with fluoroplast. Also, heavy metals can be a risk factor for renal cell carcinoma. In staging, so T1 is tumor less than 7 centimeter, T2 more than 7 centimeter. T1 is further divided into T1A and B. T1A is less than 4 centimeters, while T1B is between 4 to 7 centimeter. So if the tumor is less than 4 centimeter, partial nephrectomy can be done. Therefore, T1A for tumors having the stage T1A, partial nephrectomy is done, and T1B and beyond, radical nephrectomy needs to be done. Right. T3 is perinephric involvement of perinephric fat, the renal vein, and the IVC, and T4 is the involvement of Gerota's fascia and the adrenals. Right. For management, there are three modalities: surgery, ablation, and active surveillance. Surgery is the treatment of choice. We just read partial nephrectomy for less than or equal to 4 centimeters and radical for more than 4 centimeters. Ablation is done in tumors which are less than 4 centimeters. Elderly patient, that is, the patient is not fit for surgery. Multifocal lesion in familial RCC, or if there is post-surgical relapse. The ablation can be either cryoablation or radiofrequency ablation. Cryoablation is preferred, right? Here what is done, that ice ball is formed at the rate of 3 per millimeter proximal to the tip, right? The temperature is minus 20 degree and the technique of freeze, thaw and freeze is applied. That is, first ice ball is formed, then is thawed and it is freeze again. So this leads to micro circulation damage, causing ischemia and necrosis of the tumor and finally leading to tumor death. Right. Active surveillance is also done for tumors less than 4 centimeters, right? Elderly that are not fit for surgery, and the grade of the tumor should be low, right? Other indication can be inconclusive diagnosis. How it is done? It is done by performing a CECT or an MRI every 6 monthly. What are the contraindications for active surveillance? If the patient is young, right? Or if the radiology suggests RCC, then there is no point in doing active surveillance. It's better to treat the patient to provide him with better prognosis. Right. For locally advanced RCC, what is locally advanced RCC? That is, there is lymphovascular invasion, either of renal vein or IVC, or involvement of retroperitoneal or adjacent structures. In case of lymphovascular invasion, radical nephrectomy is done with open thrombectomy, right? If vessel wall is involved, then veno-venous grafting is also done. And if there is retroperitoneal spread, then en bloc excision with nephrectomy is done. The incision is made at the flank at 11th, between 11th to 12th intercostal space, extending towards the lateral border of the rectus. Then in partial nephrectomy, it is done for tumors less than 4 centimeter, or if it is a solitary kidney or both the kidneys are diseased, then we cannot remove both the kidneys. We need one kidney to perform the vital functions of filtration, right? Therefore, for solitary kidney or bilateral kidney diseased, also partial nephrectomy is advocated, right? Here the minimal renal reserve should be 20%, right? And the complication with this is hyperfiltration syndrome. Radical nephrectomy, what are the structures that is removed? Kidney, obviously, then perinephric fat, Gerota's fascia, along with retroperitoneal lymph node dissection is done from diaphragm to the bifurcation of aorta, right? And remember, very important, adrenals are not removed, right? Indication of removal is first if the adrenal is involved, then only it is removed, or there is upper pole tumor of the kidney. Then follow-up of RCC. First, a baseline scan is done. Then CECT or MRI is done at 3 months for follow-up. If the stage is T1, N0, M0, then annual CT or MRI is done for 3 years. Then 6 monthly CT MR for a year, and then annual CT or MR for 2 years. That is how many years? 3 plus 2, 5 years, right? Then annual HRCT for 3 years for low-grade tumor, and 6 monthly HRCT thorax for 3 years, followed by annual HRCT thorax for 2 years. Right. Now, for T2 and onwards, or any T if lymph node is involved, we treat the patient. Then Bosniak classification, it is the CD classification of renal cysts, right? This is very important. So here the grades are 1, 2, 3, 4. So 1 is a clear cyst, like I told you. This is very common and it is seen in majority of the elderly patients or post-dialysis patients that come for ultrasound. Right, here there is no risk of malignancy and you just observe it. 2 is having fine calcification and we can see thin hair-like septas. The risk of malignancy is less than 20% and here also they are just observed. Then 2F is one more, that is needs follow-up. Right. 3 is a clear cyst having irregular borders with coarse calcification and it has 60% risk of malignancy. So here surgery is done. Also the septations are thick. And stage 4, grade 4 is a cyst with soft tissue enhancement, that is it is having some solid components as well, right? And it has 80% risk of malignancy, so obviously surgery needs to be done for them. Then angiomyolipoma, right? Here what happens is that there is aneurysmal tortuous vessel plus smooth muscle plus fat, right? So here if on CT, if there is a tumor in the kidney showing fat density, it is angiomyolipoma until unless proved otherwise. Also, it is very regular and the difference between an RCC and an angiolipoma can be very well made because the RCC will have areas of necrosis and enhancement while there would be no fat density mostly, right? And angiomyolipoma will show fat density as it is seen here, right? It is more commonly seen in females and mostly it is sporadic more than familial. Remember thumb rule that all the familial tumors or all the genetic or all the condition where genetic is involved is usually seen at a younger age as compared to its sporadic age group, right? So in sporadic, AML is seen in 5th to 6th decade, while the familial is seen in 3rd decade and it is associated with tuberous sclerosis, right? It is positive for HMB45, that is human melanocyte black, and the origin cell is perivascular epithelioid cells or the PEC cells. And then what is Lenz triad? It is flank mass, flank pain with hypovolemic shock due to retroperitoneal hematoma. So what happens is that angiolipoma has a tendency to bleed and they bleed profusely into the retroperitoneum, which is called as Wunderlich syndrome, right? So Wunderlich syndrome is spontaneous retroperitoneal hemorrhage. The most common cause is AML and some RCCs may also cause it. Then the treatment of choice is gel foam angioembolization. Investigation of choice is CT scan. You can very well make it on the non-contrast sections of the flanks. For treatment again, for tumors less than 4 centimeter, and they need to undergo partial nephrectomy, while if the tumor is more than 4 centimeter, then radical nephrectomy is done. Renal score, it is done to decide between partial or radical nephrectomy, right? So to open up the abbreviation, so R is radius, E is exophytic or endophytic growth, N is nearness to the collecting duct, A anterior or posterior, and L local tissue invasions, right? Depending on this, we decide between whether we should perform a partial or a radical nephrectomy. Then Wilms tumor or nephroblastoma, right? It is unilateral more commonly than bilateral. Only 2% are bilateral. The age group is 2 to 5 years. Peak is 3 years. It is associated with nephrogenic blastema, right? The features are flank mass. It is the most important or the most presenting feature. Then there can be hypertension, hematuria, and weight loss. Again, it can be sporadic, which is more common than familial. And the familial Wilms are associated with VAGR syndrome, chromosome 11p, Beckwith-Wiedemann syndrome, again 11p15, and Denny-Strass syndrome. Also, there can be association with Li-Fraumeni syndrome. What is BAGR? It stands from Wills tumor, aniridia, genitourinary abnormalities, and mental retardation. Beckwith-Wiedemann syndrome, here everything is big. So there will be visceromegalic macroglossia, and there is central abdominal wall defect. There can also be hyperglycemia. Denny-Strass, there is nephropathy, gonadal dysgenesis, and Wilms tumor. Right. Wills tumor is also associated with increased lung mets. So the investigation of choice is CCT, and HRCT is done to see lung mets. Then it is of three types. First is favorable histology, where there will be epithelial cell, stromal cell, blastema, and the prognosis is good. Like all three cell types are present. Unfavorable histology is sarcomatous change, right? The prognosis will be poor. And third is anaplastic type. It resembles the unfavorable type, plus it also has chemo resistance, and this is having the worst prognosis, right? So there are two treatment modalities. First is surgery followed by chemo, and second is chemo followed by surgery. The chemo that is used is vincristine and dactinomycin. What are the indications for chemotherapy? First, if this tumor is large, right? Lymph node is positive, vascular invasion is present, there is only single kidney or bilateral tumor, right? Which is rare, less than 2%. But these are the indications for chemo. Then surgery is nephroureterectomy, that is a treatment of choice, or radical nephrectomy can also be done. Then staging, stage 1 is in kidney and it is resectable. Stage 2 is pre-op biopsy was done outside and resectable. 3 is it is outside the kidney or there is lymph node involvement. 4 is lymphovascular invasion, and 5, this is very important, 5 is bilateral tumor. Right. So these were the tumors of the kidney. Now let us see the tumor in bladder, right? So first is papillary urothelial lesion of low malignant potential. It is called PUNLMP, right? It is an aggressive exophytic growth of urothelium. It is not associated with malignant changes. It is just associated with pleomorphism. Okay, moving ahead to bladder cancer. It can be either urothelial, which is the most common, 90%, also called as transitional cell cancer. Squamous cell cancer, it is associated with schistosomiasis, like SS. Then there can be stasis, like bladder outlet obstruction due to stones, again S, and associated with foreign body, right? The most common being Foley's. Third is adenocarcinoma. It constitutes less than 2% of all the tumors, and here the most common site will be the dome of the bladder, right? There will be diversion of urine, so ureterosigmoidotomy needs to be done. Discharge, urethral cancer, there can be discharge at umbilicus, right, which can either be serous or serosanguinous. The risk factor are cigarette, tobacco, then 4-aminobiphenyl, chemotherapeutic drugs like cyclophosphamide, phenacetin, right? And it may also be associated with schistosomiasis and radiation. Then the T stage, it is broadly divided into non-muscle invading and muscle invading. If it is not invading the muscle or it is superficial to the muscle, then the treatment is TURBT plus intravesical chemo or immunotherapy, and is usually T1 stage, that is subendothelial. While MIBC, if the muscle is involved, then radical cystectomy needs to be done, and it is usually stage 2 to 4 of TNM staging. Stage 2 is into the muscle, 3 is outside the bladder, and stage T4 is local structure, invasion of the local structures. Investigation of choice, right? If the patient presents with hematuria, then it is CT urography, and the patient usually complains of painless hematuria, right? If the patient complains of painless hematuria, then the diagnosis of bladder cancer is more likely rather than an RCC. Then on Transurethral transurethral resection of bladder tumor, TURBT, right? Transurethral resection of bladder tumor. The advantage is that it can give the diagnosis, stage, and as well as the grade, right? For T or TM, that is solitary, grade 1 or 2, the treatment of choice is TURBT plus single dose intravesical chemo like mitomycin. T1, G1, G2, or multiple tumors, the treatment of choice is TURBT plus 6-week intravesical chemo. If it is T1 or grade 3 carcinoma in situ, then the treatment of choice is TURBT plus again 6-week intravesical immunotherapy, that is BCG. For more than T2, radical cystectomy needs to be done. Next is testicular tumor. So ITGN, it is the intratesticular germ cell neoplasm or carcinoma in situ. It is a precursor for all testicular tumor except spermocystic seminoma. Okay. It is associated with mutation of 12p, that is I inversion 12p, right? Then it is divided into germ cell tumor, non-germ cell tumor. The germ cell can be further divided into seminoma and non-seminoma. Seminoma can be classical or spermocytic. Non-seminoma are choriocarcinoma, yolk sac tumor, polyembryoma, teratoma. Then non-germinal cell tumor or non-GCT are Leydig cell. This is the most common, and here Ranke's crystals can be seen as we saw in the ovarian cancer, right? Granulosa cell tumor called Exner body, then Sertoli cell tumor and gonadoblastoma. Then the most common tumor overall is seminoma. In children or prepubertal males, it is yolk sac tumor. Most common non-seminomatous GCT is Leydig cell tumor. Most common genitourinary sarcoma is liposarcoma, and the most common is testicular sarcoma. Alright, most common non-testicular or extratesticular site is retroperitoneum, followed by mediastinum, and in mediastinum it is anterior more than middle mediastinum. Also, left side of mediastinum is more commonly involved. Most common site for paratesticular tumor is epididymis, right? There we can see adenomatoid tumor of epididymis. Right. So testicular sarcoma, most common is liposarcoma in adults and rhabdomyosarcoma in a child. Now, the patient will present with painless woody mass in the scrotum. Right. For management, there is biochemical plus clinical. Biochemical, the tumor marker will either have LDH1 positive, alpha fetoprotein, beta HCG, or all three positive, right? So depending on this, we can classify the tumor. Then clinical, there will be painless testicular mass. Then remember, seminoma is LDH positive, but alpha fetoprotein negative. Also, 15 to 20% are beta HCG positive, but this is very important, LDH positive. This was asked in November INICT. Then it can also be positive for PLAP, CD111, CD117, and CD30 is negative. Then embryonal cell cancer, it is LDH positive, alpha feto AFP positive, beta HCG positive, CD30 positive. Right, this is CD30 positive and CD117 negative. And then it can be OCT3, OCT4. It can be associated with OCT3, OCT4 as well. Choriocarcinoma, it is beta HCG positive, AFP negative, and LDH positive. So you need to remember this. Just make a table and paste it on your wall. It's very easy. Remember LDH with seminoma, right? Beta HCG with choriocarcinoma, because choriocarcinoma, remember we read in in OBS that it is with molar pregnancy. So pregnancy has beta HCG. So remember choriocarcinoma, beta HCG, seminoma, LDH, and embryonal cell is positive for both. Then it is chemosensitive, right? It is the most common testicular tumor with spontaneous hemorrhage, the most common testicular tumor with brain mets, choriocarcinoma. Then yolk sac tumor, it is alpha feto AFP positive, LDH can be positive or negative, and beta HCG is negative. Remember, yolk sac tumor, alpha fetoprotein. Then, as in ovarian cancer, it has Schiller-Dubel bodies and hyaline globules. Then teratoma, remember, it is chemo resistant. It is positive for beta HCG and it is negative for most of the other markers, and beta HCG also is weakly positive. Right. Then conversion into other somatic malignancy can be first adenocarcinoma, second neuroendocrine tumor, and third rhabdomyosarcoma. Because teratoma has all the three germ cell layers, right? So it can convert into any other malignancy as well. And what is growing teratoma syndrome? This was asked in PGI. So an aggressively growing teratoma invading into local structures and becoming irresectable is known as a growing teratoma syndrome. Right? Then treatment of choice for testicular tumors. We do not perform, like we do not just remove the tumor. We ask the patient to undergo high inguinal orchidectomy, right? And then biopsy is done. According to the biopsy report, treatment is done. If it is seminoma, stage 1, then radiotherapy is given, right? And the dogleg regimen is done, which is para-aortic lymph nodes, right? It is also known as J-shaped or hockey stick regimen. For stage 2, radiotherapy and chemotherapy can be given. If it is non-seminoma, then non-seminomatous tumors are chemosensitive. So in first stage, radiotherapy and chemotherapy is done. And in second stage, along with this, retroperitoneal lymph node dissection is also done. Now, the next topic is prostate cancer. Right. So here Gleason score is important. This was also asked this year, and I don't remember the question. I think Gleason score was less than 7. So I marked the answer as active surveillance because the patient was also old. I don't remember the question exactly, but yeah, just knowing Gleason score is important because this can be asked. Right. It grades the prostatic cancer. Grade 2, 3, 4 is mild. 5, 6, 7 is moderate, and 8, 9, 10 is severe. What are the rules? Two most common pathologies are selected, and each pathology is graded on a scale of 1 to 5, right? Where 1 is most differentiated and 5 is most undifferentiated. Then individual Gleason's grade is added to get a score out of 10. In case of a single pathology, its grade is double, right? For example, if this is the tumor and this is the pathology, it has a grade of 4. So in this case, the Gleason will be 4 plus 4, that is 8 out of 10. Now let us look at another example which has multiple pathologies like A, B, C, and D. A is 35%, B is 5%, C is 3%, D is 2%, right? And the grade is 4, 5, 5, 5, 5. So here what will we do? Would it be 4 plus 5? No. Why not? Because in calculation of Gleason score, the incidence of pathology which is less than 5% is not counted. So this will not be counted, this will not be counted, this will not be counted, and the score will again be 4 plus 4. That is, it will be doubled for pathology A and it will be 8 out of 10 only. Then the markers for prostate cancer, PSA. This is serine protease or arginine esterase. The molecular weight is 33 kilodalton and it consists of 7% carbohydrate. Then it has a free form which increases in benign condition and bound form which is increased in malignancy, right? Because the rupture of the basement membrane releases PSA in the blood and it is a club with protein. It is clubbed with protein, right? Second is PSMA, that is prostate specific membrane antigen, PCA3, DD3, EPCA2, urine based. These are more specific for CA prostate. PBOV, this is prostate and breast overexpression, UROC28, CD105. Then annexin, hepsin, TRMPSS, AMCAR, RASF1A. Just go through these. It's not important to remember them, but you should know that these can be asked because they can ask you to select the odd one out in them. Next are the genes. First is RNA cell, that is HPC1 on chromosome 1. It is the most important gene. ELAC2, MSR1. Just go through them. No need to remember all these. Now talking about the management, what all can be done? first, surgery is the treatment of choice, and the procedure is radical prostatectomy, right? Now, if there is increased risk of incontinence or increased risk of infertility, right? And then we see that the life expectancy is more than 10 years, or the age of the patient is less than 75 years, then only surgery is advocated, right? If the age is more than 75 years or life expectancy is less than 10 years, then there is no need to perform such surgery in such an elderly patient, right? For them, it is beautiful watching is sufficient. Then radiotherapy, it can be primary or adjunct, right? Remember the 678 rule, that is 70 to 80 gray is given for 6 weeks. Then active surveillance, it is done in young patient, right, with a PSA less than 10 nanogram per ml, T1 or T2A, and Gleason score less than 6. This is important. Finally, ablation can also be done. For advanced tumors, there can be procedures. First is medical castration, that is a treatment of choice, and surgical castration, right? So first, let us talk about the medical castration. GnRH agonist is given that causes feedback after 4 to 6 weeks, hence flaring can be seen. Hence, initially androgen blockers are given. Then with GnRH antags, there is no flare. Androgen blocker can be given. Surgical castration, open the tunica, remove soft tissue mass, and then subcapsular orchidectomy is performed. This procedure is known as Charles Huggins procedure. Next, carcinoma penis, right? This is the last tumor, and the most common site is glans, followed by prepuce, then glans and prepuce, and finally shaft is the least common site. Most common is squamous cell carcinoma. T1 is subendothelial, T2 cavernosal, T3 is involvement of urethra, T4 is the involvement of adjacent structures, right? And for more than or equal to T2, inguinal block dissection is also done, right? So what we see is that if suppose a tumor is here, then after performing amputation, there should be more than 2 centimeter margin from the tumor from which the penis is cut, and the stump should also be remnant, that the remnant stump should also be 2 centimeters. So the next topic is nephrolithiasis, right? The stones in kidney are formed over Randall's plaque, that is hydroxyapatite, right? These all are questions. What is epitaxy? It is the enlargement of stone by growth of one stone over another, right? Jess and equal are stone prediction scores. Then concentration product, it is a concentration of solute in the solvent, right? The threshold level, if it is reached, then it is called as the saturation product. That is the concentration at which the stone should precipitate, but due to the presence of inhibitors, there is no stone formation. Then what is formation product? It is a concentration at which effect of inhibitors is neutralized and hence stones are formed. So remember, if concentration product is more than saturation product, there will be no stone formation. But if it is more than the formation product, then only stones will form. Then the types of stone, right? First is calcium oxalate. It is most important. Cysteine, it is the hardest stone. Struvite, it is an infection stone, right? It is a triple phosphate stone, that is magnesium ammonium phosphate with calcium apatite, also called as staghorn calculi. Then urate stones, these are ammonium urate stones associated with laxatives and IBS. Then triamtrene, silicates, dunavir, ephedrine, these are drugs that are associated with stone. Then matrix stones, these are stones without any inorganic part, right? So 65% is protein, 10% is glycosaminoglycans, sugars, and organic ash. They are brick red in color, spongy with multiple air pockets, and associated with recurrent UTI. The treatment of choice is rhinoscopic removal. This is very important, right? Then the investigation of choice for renal stones is helical CT more than NCCT, but NCCT for all practical purposes is the investigation of choice. Then if the stone is not in the lower pole, then we see the size. If it is less than 1 centimeter, extracorporeal shock wave lithotripsy is done. Stones between 1 to 2 centimeter in size, then we look at the skin to stone distance. If it is less than 10 centimeter and the attenuation of stone is less than 1000 HU or Hounsfield unit, then also ESWL is done. But if the skin to stone distance is more than 10 centimeter, or it is in hard stone, that is attenuation is more than 1000 Hounsfield units, or it is a calcium oxalate monohydrate, cysteine, or matrix stone. For all these cases, rhinoscopy is the treatment of choice, and if rhinoscopy fails, then PCNL is done. For stones more than 2 centimeter, PCNL is the only treatment modality. For lower pole stones, again, if it is less than 1 centimeter, skin to stone distance less than 10 centimeter, and less than 10 Hounsfield unit, the trial of ESWL can be done. But if not, then rhinoscopy is done. Also for stones 1 to 2 centimeter, rhinoscopy is done. And if rhinoscopy fails, then again PCNL is done. For stones more than 2 centimeter, PCNL is the treatment modality. This is a very important table. It will solve all the questions regarding renal stone, and renal stone is a very high yield topic in all the exam. Then the first line for 1 to 2 centimeter stones, it is ESWL, right? The trial is given. Why it is not preferred is that because there is increased risk of UTI. Now in ureters, up to 4 to 5 centimeter can be treated conservatively, while in kidney up to 6 millimeter can be managed conservatively. What is the conservative management? Hydration, NSAIDs, and antibiotics. I've in fact seen people with 10 stones passing them just by drinking ample amount of water, right? Next are ureteric stones. Um, the most common clinical feature, or the patient will come with pain that is from loin to groin because of the involvement of genitofemoral nerve, and that is T10 to L1, right? So if you look at the course of the ureter, there can be few places where there is constrictions where the stone can be stuck. First is at the uretropelvic junction. Second is mid-ureter at the level of crossing of iliac veins. Third is at the crossing of vas, which is a less common site. And finally, the stone can be stuck at the vesicourethral junction. So, I remember like when we used to do ultrasound, we used to just keep the stone the probe at three places: the UPJ, mid-ureter at the iliac crossing, and the VUJ. And 99% of the time the stone could be localized at either of these locations, most common being the VUJ, right? The indications for intervention is: first, if there is recurrent UTI, a stone more than 5 millimeter in size, if it has been more than 4 to 6 weeks, or in a young patient, right? For upper one third stones, the treatment of choice is ureterorhinoscopic stone removal, right? Middle one third also, it is ureterorhinoscopic stone removal. For lower one third stones, if the stone is not stuck, then URSL is done. But if it is stuck, then cystoscopic removal needs to be done, right? That are for stones that are impacted, especially at the meatus, right? Then if the stone is stuck at the meatus, then what will we see? That if dye is injected, then there will be VUR. Now, Dormia basket was initially done as a blind procedure for single stone. Only lower one third of ureteric stones were removed by this procedure. Now it is obsolete. Okay, bladder stones. Then they can be either primary bladder stones, which are more common, or secondary bladder stones that are associated with infection. The secondary are phosphate stones, and the more common are mixed uric acid or mixed urate stones, right? These are radio opaque due to the presence of calcium carbonate. Now remember that renal stones are rare in children, and bladder stones are more common in children, right? The child will have clinical features like pain over the tip of genitalia, right? It increases on ambulation, and it is associated with decrease in recumbency. So this is the stone, that is the jack stone, right? It has spines all over it. There can be terminal hematuria, that is hematuria at the end of urination due to again the spines. The management for these stones is again cystoscopic removal. Then the next topic is renal injury. So retroperitoneal tamponade is that the retroperitoneum provides tamponade and manages minor renal bleed. But if ligament of treat is breached, the effect is lost. Hence, single shot IVU is done to detect intra-op confirmation of renal injury. Right? This is important. This was asked in a question, single shot IVU. Then the grade of renal injury according to AST criteria. First is hematuria or subscapular hematoma. Second is perirenal hematoma, that is non-expanding or less than 1 centimeter, and there is no urine leak. Third is very important. It is more than 1 centimeter laceration without urine leak. Four is injury to the collecting duct, that is there will be urine leak or there will be a renal vessel injury. And fifth is complete devascularization or shattered kidney, that is in hilar injury. Hilar injury is spleen. In spleen, remember, is grade 4 injury, right? Then ureteric injury, repair over stents which are kept for 4 to weeks, preventing urinoma, prevent malignant strictures. ठीक है, so what is that? Is that we repair over the stents which are kept for 4 to 6 weeks, and this will prevent the formation of urinoma and malignant strictures. Malalignment and strictures. Right. So for lower 1/3, what we do is reimplantation because there is increased chance of stricture formation. Middle 1/3, end-to-end ureterostomy and crossed ureteric anastomosis can be done, that is transposition. For upper 1/3 injury, end-to-end ureteric anastomosis can be done. Right. Boary's flap repair is done using a bladder. There is tubulization of bladder wall to add to the increased length of the ureter, and it is done in case of there is loss of ureteric length. Investigation of choice for ureteric injury is retrograde RGU. Right, then bladder injury. It can be of two types, extraperitoneal or intraperitoneal. For extraperitoneal bladder injury, the treatment choice is observation with bladder catheterization. And in intraperitoneal, there is urine in the abdomen that may lead to chemical peritonitis. Therefore, the treatment of choice here is always exploratory laparotomy followed by repair. Then urethral injury. Now, it is divided into two types, anterior urethra, that is the bulbar or penile urethra, and the posterior urethra, that is the prostate and the membranous urethra. Right. So, anterior urethral injury, it is usually a straddle injury, and there can be anuria, blood at meatus, perineal hematoma, or the butterfly hematoma. Right. In posterior urethral injuries, they are usually associated with pelvic fracture, and there can be again anuria, blood at the meatus, but there will be a high riding prostate or a flying prostate, which is known as Weir-Mouton sign. Right. The investigation of choice is again RGU or a flexible cystoscopy. Right. So if an RGU injury is present, then the next step is suprapubic catheterization. This was asked in both the recent exams, NEET and INI-CET. Right. Then realignment of urethra is done with a cowed or a council tip catheter. This is Mitchell and Blandy technique or the railroad technique. On RGU, if no injury is present, then simple Foley's catheterization is done. Now, penile fracture. Right. It is the last topic that we'll be studying in Euro. After that, we'll be starting with endo. So, penile fracture, it is the most common cause of violent sexual activity leading to damage to tunica albuginea. There is rapid detumescence with a snap or a pop sound, right? And this is called as an eggplant deformity. You all might relate to the eggplant emoji that we keep sending on Snapchat. So, yeah. Then, tunica albuginea. It is 2 millimeters, right? And on erection, it becomes thin, like only 0.5 mm. So therefore, there is that. The treatment of choice is any penile fracture has to be repaired with the Vicryl 2.0 sutures. Remember, we learned about sutures. The uses of Vicryl were for CBD in ureteric repair and also for the first layer of bladder. This is one more point. Please add it to your notes there, that penile fracture is also repaired with Vicryl because penis is also related to ureter and bladder, right? Nietzsche organ. Then facial layers of penis. So superficial, there is dartos, which is continuous with the scarpas in the abdomen and coles in the peritoneum. And Buck's fascia, this is transversus abdominis and Buck, both injured. If both are injured, this leads to perineal hematoma or the butterfly hematoma. right? And the deep layer is tunica albuginea. If injured with intact bugs, it will lead to sleeve hematoma. Like only this, ठीक है, bug is ठीक है, tunica albuginea is खराब, so this will be sleeve hematoma. This completes the high yield topics in urology.